Hello and welcome to part 2, yes, part 2 of our big Samsung group test. If you haven't checked out part 1, our speed test of all the Galaxy S devices, click the link somewhere around us up here in the ether. But if you already have watched that, stay tuned because we've got some exciting stuff coming right up.
So this is the battery test, where basically we take all the phones, put them through our battery tests and find out which ones last the longest. It's a very simple situation. So we're going to dive right in. Now, one of the key things we've got to caveat with this is we couldn't obviously find all these phones from new. So take this test with a little pinch of salt because the Galaxy S, which is multiple years old, is as old as it was back then, and the Galaxy S2, S3 are for 1 year less each time. And the other difference is that some of these phones we use more than others because these are all our old review devices. For instance, the Galaxy S2 was such a powerful, popular phone that we ended up having to do a lot with it. But anyway, with that in mind, let's get on to the test and find out which phone did the best.
Okay, so let's start with one key fact. Obviously, what we do with the battery test normally is we have a variety of different tests to go through. So we have web browsing, YouTube, gaming. But in this situation, we found after 10 minutes that web browsing script just wasn't working. The Galaxy S, S2 and S3 all had problems running the script, so we were forced to change our minds and go specifically just for YouTube.
So after an hour and a half of our battery test, and the S8 Plus unsurprisingly is out ahead. It's got by far the most efficient processor, but it hasn't got the biggest battery. That's the S7 Edge, which is also putting in a good showing. Another surprising thing is the S4 is actually not doing as well as the S3, and the S6 is also slipping behind the S5, and that's because we found when we reviewed the S6 a few years ago, its battery was a little on the slippy side, so this isn't a huge surprise for us.
So we're up to 3 hours now, and things are largely as you'd expect. Still, the S5 is doing pretty well, John. You know, the 54% there is pretty good compared to the S6, which is 43. And again, bears out the fact that the S6 just didn't have a good battery life. I mean, you think you're worried for the S, aren't you? Really, with 13% battery life left, it's not going to go very long, is it?
There's not long left at all, no. The S2, the S3 is doing surprisingly well, to be fair. It's 33%. That's still got a decent slug of life left in it.
How's it doing better than the S4? That's interesting because, you know, the S4 is a much more powerful phone. It's got more resolution. It seems that's an interesting one, and I'd say that's probably down to the fact that the batteries themselves, maybe the S4's had a little bit more use. We did test it quite extensively, so you can look at that and say they're fairly neck and neck.
There's also a bigger display at a higher resolution,
exactly.
So that will power suck more, and there might be questions over the processor inside as well. You didn't use Snapdragon's top-end processor at the time. And we have our first fatality, and it's not, Gareth, the Galaxy S.
I did not see this coming.
Out of the blue.
Yeah, it's the Galaxy S2. That died at 4 hours and 3 minutes compared to the Galaxy S, which went at 4 hours and 8. That's interesting for a number of reasons. Obviously, the Galaxy S has a smaller battery. That's 1500 compared to 1650 for the Galaxy S2. But let's be honest, the reason is the Galaxy S2 is one of the best phones in the world, and that means that the review we had was actually used a lot more. We did a lot more updating with it. We had to keep testing it for different things, and so the Galaxy S, I think, is still more box fresh than the Galaxy S2, which is going to make a big difference to how well the battery holds on. But it is interesting to see how the Galaxy S, with 13% left with 3 hours, managed to hold on for quite some time. That's a pretty good effort for the Hummingbird processor.
There's obviously some good sort of lower power mode going on in the background there, and after the quick 1-2 punch of the S and the S2 dying, we've got another 2 fatalities very close to each other. First up, it was the S3 at 4 hours and 32 minutes, followed 3 minutes later by the S4. Not really surprising, you'd expect those sort of results. And that leaves us with 4 handsets, and it's another hour and a half before we had our next fatality, and it came in the shape of the Galaxy S6, not the S5.
I mean, at the start of the test, I wouldn't have said this would happen. I thought they might have been quite close, possibly because I've said the Galaxy S5 has a bigger battery, and in our reviews, the S6 didn't do so well. But I'm surprised it went at 607. You would have thought, especially at low power mode, I thought Samsung would have tweaked it better. But coming into at 4 hours 30, the Galaxy S5 still had 29% left, so arguably didn't have that big a task to go.
Absolutely.
So in terms of when we finished this test, the idea was just till the end of the day, but the Galaxy S6 held on with its 1% for another 7 minutes, so our poor video producer had to wait a little bit longer. But 6 hours 7, end of the day, that's when we finished the test, and as you can see, the Galaxy S5 had 8% left, the Galaxy S7 Edge 26%, that's pretty good after 6 hours of testing, and the Galaxy S8 Plus, again, despite having a smaller battery, Samsung's really got its optimization right. You know, the fact that it's looked at the processor, it's looked at the way it's tweaked the internals, and it's just a much more power efficient phone.
So there you have it. That is our big battery test. And Gareth, what stood out to you the most?
Well, I'm trying to think about how I felt about this battery test. You know, it was like seeing a family reunion of all our review devices together.
It was almost humbling.
Yeah, and some of the ones, you know, you felt a bit disappointed by, the Galaxy S4 for instance, the S5, it's not a good looking phone but performed well. So ultimately, yeah, the S5 is a good example there actually, because it was the phone that, it was Samsung's last hurrah as being a powerful smartphone manufacturer before it changed its mind and went more design focused and basically tried to be a bit more Apple-y really, didn't it?
Yeah.
So the S6 was when things started to change. There was no micro SD, there was no removable battery, and ultimately that seemed to have an effect on battery life.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't as efficient. That's something we found in our review as well of the
Yeah.
S6, but then we can see from the results that Samsung realised that, stepped it up for the S7 and then the S8, so things have got a lot better. Remember the S8 Plus that we've used here has a bigger battery than the standard S8.
And is newer as well, of
And
course.
is newer, so there's lots going on under there and it's going to last a long time.
And ultimately the thing that's most impressive is just how much further Samsung's come in a year. So the Galaxy S7 Edge was the phone that blitzed all our battery tests last year, but the Galaxy S8 Plus has taken it to another step, despite not having a battery that's as big. So ultimately Samsung has proven, as it said at the launch, we've made it more efficient, we've worked out the ways to get your battery life lasting longer, and that clearly has happened.
But that's not all, folks. We've got 2 more big Samsung tests coming up. 2 more, Gav, 2 more. So do stay tuned. They'll be coming at you very soon. But for now, let us know what you think about these phones in the comments below. Did you own any of these phones? How did you find the battery life on them? What else would you like to see done with these phones? Don't forget to click that like button. Don't forget to click that subscribe button. And we'll see you again very soon for some more Samsung action.